Hello and welcome to a Mooks and Monsters. I'm Tim Niederreiter, and I'm alone, flying solo today. So we're going to be for a little bit of a shorter episode, but this is a Mooks and Monsters, like I said, and Rob is a busy dude. He's a busy actor dude, and so it falls to me to run the show this week. And so I figured we can talk about building characters for games, for stories, for all sorts of things. So it's kind of a casual episode. And I like the idea of building characters for stories. I am an author. I write books. So this is kind of what I do a lot of the time. When I'm preparing to write a book, I'll build the characters. When I'm preparing a game, I will make the characters. That's kind of the most important part of any game for me, is the character creation. And in this case, that's mostly NPCs. I mean, and obviously playing the game is very important too, but mostly the NPCs. And the way we take on that task is really, really vital to the way your game works. And if you don't make your NPCs stand out in a way that is distinctive and dynamic, and we've talked about this a bunch on the show when Rob has been here, but I'm just kind of going to drill down into some of the elements that are not specific, but that are things that you can do to build characters and be more effective at doing so. So, yeah. First off, I would say the most important detail or most important step or technique to use is to remain flexible while you're creating characters, and you can change details about them as long as you haven't revealed them to the player. So this requires kind of some mental gymnastics some of the time, but if you wait to display a trait of a character, then that trait doesn't have to exist until your players have witnessed it. And I would be careful with how you wing things, and how you change your plans. But usually, unless it's a core trait of a character, you should be able to change things on the fly. And I don't necessarily mean change things, because in my case, change them from something else to something different, you know? In my case, when I'm writing a book, I will have a character sheet. I'll have an idea of what the character is like, but it's not as detailed as you might guess. Even for a big, long novel, I tend to write, a page or two of character notes, and that's it. I hit the important stuff that's really vital, and the rest I discover as I go. That's just the kind of writer I am. And I do the similar thing in RPGs. So, when I write an RPG that is, when I write a session for a game, I come up with the ideas for the NPCs. I come up with their core relationships and stuff, and the rest of it's up in the air. And until it matters, I don't display it. I don't write it down, and until I've tell the PCs about it. So I do write some notes during the game, just quick shorthand stuff, and I do the same sort of thing in books. So that's where I get that idea. Be flexible with your NPCs. So, as for something we don't touch on much in the show when Rob's here, because we do run different systems, I'd say the statistics of an NPC should be nailed down at some point if they're going to be important in the game. And in some games, those stats can be extremely simple, like in Fate Core, which is the game I'm kind of looking at now. In some games, they can be quite complex, like in Dungeons and Dragons or Mutants and Masterminds. If you have a combat encounter with an NPC, you need a lot of stats from them sometimes. But the interesting thing is, at least with the Fate Core versus Mutants and Masterminds or D&D, if you don't need their stats for D&D, if you're not going to fight this character, their stats are almost unimportant if they're not going to be involved in combat. And then but in a game like Fate Core, a character's their stats are really story stats, and that's kind of where the rest of this discussion is probably going to go. These are stats; they're things that are going to help you describe who that character is. In the case of the non-player characters. And that's really useful to me personally, because when I run an NPC that is, not someone I know super well, it's not a character as something, it's not a character I'm that familiar with, it's important to get a feel, again, just for me, obviously this might vary, but I like to have a feel for what they're capable of, because I think that's a big part of a person's life. Superman, just he can do all sorts of stuff that normal people can't do. And it changes his attitude. It makes him feel more like more, it gives him a different perspective on the world, and that's useful for all sorts of story stuff as well as character stuff. So, story over system. That's really the gist of this whole thing. Usually, it doesn't matter what game you're running, the people in it are going to basically be the same sort of characters. You'll have I don't mean stock characters. I mean they're going to be people, and all people have some of the same traits. They've got their desires, they've got their goals. Those are the same thing a lot of the time. But they also have their methods, and they have their exterior, their mask. Their external presentation to the world. And all these traits, and I could go on forever about them because characters are thick. It's a big subject. But one of the key traits here that you want to remember is that you focus on the story, on delivering what the story is. It doesn't matter what it says on the character sheet. It doesn't, and I don't mean like even the stat sheet. I mean the notes that you made up for the character if they were important enough to do so. So if you don't have that, if you don't have the character sheet, the characters nailed down, fixed in stone, they can grow and organically, and it becomes very fun to play them. And you also aren't limited by things. So you're not trying to check your notes every 5 seconds to see, is his favorite color blue or whatever. I mean, that's not important. And the other point is, even if it is important, if you change it and you never play it the other way, then you don't need those. Then it is the way you played it. That's kind of the bottom line. It's the way you play it. Just like, I mean, it's a common writer mistake, and I've done it myself, is where you start writing a character in a story, and then what you put of the character, what you like about the character doesn't make it into the actual thing you wrote. And that's a beginner mistake. I think a lot of people do it. And actually, it continues to be a problem for a lot of writers, even after they advance quite a ways. And, having the thing that drew you to a character not in the game session, not in the book, not on the page, not in the world of the story, is as good as not ever having created it in the first place. That's kind of harsh, but it's true. If you don't make your character live in whatever medium they are existing in, then it doesn't matter what you did with their character sheet, with their stats, with anything you did with the character is meaningless if you can't deliver an effect. And you can do that with the voices. We've talked about that. We did a whole episode about that kind of thing. The narration, where you describe what the character does and how they act and their mannerisms that you convey to the players or to the readers in the case of stories. And this is kind of a double whammy episode, because it's really writing advice that goes equally for characters in books and in games. So, as far as games, I think that about does it. I mean, as far as the games go, just make sure I wouldn't overburden the character yourself with details about the characters, but make sure you keep the most important stuff consistent. Actually, try to keep as much consistent as you can, but make sure you keep the most important stuff in your mind when you're actually playing an NPC, because when you actually play an NPC, it means the character is coming to life through you. You're acting a character that you created in most cases, or a character that was created in the module you're playing. And it's a very special thing. I just want to say, it makes me feel like it's one of the more intense experiences I've ever taken part in that doesn't involve running around or punching something. It's just not the same kind of thing you can get anywhere else. It's kind of thrilling when you get used to what it is, and you get into the role, And I've done very limited acting, but I have written a bunch of books, and I think there's a similarity there. I think that's definitely a place, and I think Rob would probably tell you that too. I think if he were here, God bless him, he would tell you something similar. So, thank you for listening to this episode of Mooks and Monsters. You can find more of us at mentalcellarpublications.com. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at TNeederwriter. You can follow Rob on Twitter. He's at StageHat. The show is hosted by Libsyn. Have a great week. Thanks for listening, folks.